What's so interesting about this structure is how old it is. It's somewhere between 50 and 60 million years old. It is incredibly old. So neuroscientists divide the human brain into three, we talk about three brains, three distinct brains. I don't know how many of you are neuroscientists here, so I won't go into detail, but the three brains are the newest brain, the neocortex, the human brain, which in our form is somewhere around 200, maybe 300,000 years old. And then underneath that new brain, there's an older brain, which is called the mammalian brain. And that's the limbic system, the amygdala in particular, which is the source of strong emotions, the source of the kinds of emotional associations that we form as we go through life. But underneath those two is a third brain, an ancient brain called the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain was designed to deal with danger. The reptilian brain is kind of like the human brain's alarm system, and it never goes off. The reptilian brain runs 24/7. So what it's doing is it's constantly monitoring for danger. I'll give you a real interesting example of this. I was just telling Mary I just came back from a long trip, and I was in Australia, and I've been traveling a little too much. And when I got to Perth, the first night, I went to sleep at about 8, and I woke up at 3 in the morning. I was absolutely in a state of fight or flight, full state of fight or flight. Why? Well, because in my sleep, I'd heard the door rattling. And when the door rattled, what happened was my middle brain interpreted this as a burglar, even though I was way high up. So I'm lying there, and then, fortunately, the prefrontal came in and said, well, it's probably not a burglar because unless it's Spider-Man, you're safe. So then the scientist in me kicked in, and I thought, well, this is kind of cool. I wonder what my heart rate is. So what we use this is our science tool. So on our iPhone, we have something called My Heart Buddy. So I clicked on My Heart Buddy, and I saw that my heart rate was about 100 beats a minute. Okay, now, anybody want to take a guess what controls heart rate? You weren't paying attention. Thank you. Okay, so my heart rate was around 100 beats a minute, and I don't have a little blood pressure, whatever those sphygmometers attached to my iPhone, but I'm sure my blood pressure had gone up. Do you want to take a guess what controls blood pressure? Okay, so you get the idea here, right? So then I thought, well, that's kind of cool. Now we have another one called My Breath Buddy. So I thought, well, I wonder what my breath is. So I was breathing 40 breaths a minute, okay? Just out of curiosity, what controls breathing? Okay, this is very cool, right? So this tiny little mechanism, which is housed at the top of the brainstem, controls all those functions. Why? Why would the hypothalamus have raised my heart rate, raised my blood pressure, and raised my breathing? That's a question. This is a small room. You can answer. Why do you think?
Getting ready to run or fight.
There you go. Thank you. Why would it do that? Why would it have to raise? Don't answer it again. Why would it have? Well, he knows the answer, so it's no fun. Why would it raise heart rate? No, seriously though. Why would it raise heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing in order to get ready to run or fight? So, tell me physically, so what? Why would it do that? Why? Okay, so the adrenaline is what he's talking about. The adrenaline is what triggers these things. Okay, finish that.
Well, if your heart rate is at 60, you're going to be much slower than your heart is pumping.
Why? Well, yes. Yes. Good. So what has to happen here for this to happen is I have to get glucose and oxygen into the muscles. That's what they run on. But you got a problem. And the problem that, or at least the reptilian brain has a problem. And the problem that the reptilian brain has is we have a finite amount of glucose. We run on glucose. Human beings, that's what we are. We run on glucose. And we also run on there's a sugar in alcohol, which is one of the reasons why we like to drink. It's not the only reason. But our main source of energy is glucose, and we have a small tank. So say it's like owning a Fiat Cinquecento. It's a tiny little tank. And so now the hypothalamus has a problem. This is a really ancient part of the brain, and it is unbelievably stupid. I mean, it's so stupid that it thought that the banging door was a burglar, right? It doesn't know. So its problem is that when it goes into fight or flight, because this was designed, let's say 50 million years ago, because it's so ancient, it's going to assume it's a predator. And it doesn't know how long this damn thing is going to be chasing me, trying to catch me. As far as it knows, it could be this could be a 3-day run. So what it does is it starts to shut down things. It starts to shut down what it regards, what evolution regarded as non-essential functions in order to have enough glucose so that my muscles can continue to fight or flee. So what do you think it shuts down? What are some of the things? Yep. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, I was going to tell you. Well, you know, when we do this kind of thing, like, you guys should know each other, so you shouldn't be so shy about, you know, like he said it quietly in case he was wrong. But he wasn't, he was right. So it shuts down thinking. It shuts down prefrontal. Because thinking, as you all know, I mean, you know, after the lecture or just during the lecture, your head's going to start to hurt. Thinking is expensive. And so in this state, you know, you're in danger here. This could be a saber-toothed tiger. I don't need you thinking. I don't need you pausing and saying, you know, it's a tiger, run. I could, right? So what happens is it shuts that down so that your actions are now under the control of limbic and reptilian. You are now a creature of impulse, and you should be thinking about those children that you see. You should be thinking about those kids that are highly impulsive. Why is this happening? Well, it's a sign that something has shut down, and then the question we want to ask ourselves is, why is it shut down? We'll get to that in a second. Okay, so thinking does shut down, and the example that I give when I teach this properly is I once had hypothermia. I was rescuing a dog. It's a long story, and it's a stupid dog, and the dog went back in, and I got hypothermia, and I was only 50 feet from the shore of my causeway, and I couldn't turn around to get out. I was frozen, and my son had been watching the whole thing from the house, and he came running out to save the dog. So fortunately, I came with the dog. But I really do wonder sometimes what might have happened to me had my son not been home, because I stood there, like literally, it was like being in a fog. So that's very interesting. Okay, what else shuts? Well, by the way, what shuts that down? So you see how this thing is working? This thing is in charge of the gas tank. In fact, the way we explain it is the theory of self-regulation is about 150 years old. It was first discovered by the father of modern physiology, a Frenchman called Claude Bernard. And then it was rediscovered early in the 20th century by a great Canadian called Hans Selye, who taught Fraser. Fraser then taught me and Clyde, so it's a very interesting, that's where self-regulation came from in this Canadian context. So the model that they used to explain it was a thermostat. A thermostat is a classic self-regulating system. So you set the thermostat at 20, and the idea is that the temperature turns on at 17, turns off at 22. Because we have to conserve energy and we don't want things to overheat. Well, that's what we're looking at when we're looking at what the hypothalamus does. It shuts down things and it turns in order to raise the heart, raise the breathing, raise circulation, et cetera. Okay, what else does it shut down? There's some very interesting things it shuts down. You can figure this one out. Yep. Yeah, why would it do that? Great answer. Terrific answer. She's absolutely right. Because the function of digestion is to give you energy tomorrow, right? Well, we don't, the hypothalamus doesn't know. By the way, it's the hypothalamus, again, that shuts down digestion. So it doesn't know there's going to be a tomorrow. So at this point in time, you know, digestion consumes the same amount of energy as the brain. The two biggest burners of energy in the human body are brain and gut. And they both consume the same amount. It's about 15% each of our total energy. So that's a huge unnecessary, at this point in time, it's unnecessary. So it shuts down digestion. Think about the kids that if you're educators, the kids who never seem to know that they're hungry. What is that telling us? Okay, what else does it shut down? The reason you got a cold is because travel and jet lag are stressors. They are physiological stressors, and they turn off, they suppress. Yes, they shut down the immune system. That's why you got the cold, because normally you don't get sick. So this is very interesting. In the hypothermia example, the cold, the ambient temperature is a stressor, and you all know that, right? You know how hard it is for you to think or to digest if you get really, really hot or really, really cold, because you're burning so much energy. Well, in this case, jet lag or even flying is a stressor. Okay, what else shuts down? Yes. So think about now, okay, so I'll just address this to this side because there's only one man on this side. Oh, there's two, forgive me. So I want you to think of something when your husband did something that was incredibly stupid even for him. Okay, so you're now fit to be tied. How eloquent were you? Got your thoughts out nice and lucid, were you? No, because what happens is we start to struggle for our words. So stress has a profound impact, and now we have to, again, we think about a child who's overstressed has literally no capacity. If you ask him, how do you feel, you're clearly not a parent. That child will not answer, that child cannot answer, and you have to find other strategies. And we have lots of strategies that we use clinically for when children are highly stressed but cannot speak. Okay, so this is very interesting. Each of these functions is turned off or on by the hypothalamus. Some very interesting ones are turned off. And one of the most interesting ones is the muscles in, this was discovered by Porges. Steve discovered this. The muscles in the middle ear constrict. And the capacity to hear the human voice is dramatically reduced. So now you think about the kid who doesn't respond when you call his name 16 times. Well, it could be he's being oppositional. I'll bet you $100 that he's not. I'll bet you anything that he's overstressed, and this is a sign that this is shut down. But then the question is, why would it shut down? Sorry, I find this stuff so interesting that I don't keep to my own game plan. Why do you think it shuts down? Why would it shut down? It shuts down that kind of hearing in order to accentuate a different kind of hearing. Anyone want to? Can you take a guess? Do you know the answer to this? This is a toughie. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's a real interesting thing. Okay, in this room, at this moment, there are at least 4 or 5 different stressors. I'm just going to do one. Do you hear the slight hum behind me? How many of you does it bother? Okay, so only maybe a 10th. How many does it now bother? Okay, what happens is under stress, that's called a low frequency, it's a low frequency sound. And under stress, the hypothalamus shuts down the part of the brain that listens to the human voice in order to heighten, intensify the part that listens for low frequency sounds. Why would it do that? Why would it be so, it's called kindling the alarm system. Why would it be so focused on low frequency sounds? Take a guess. Like? Exactly. I don't know where you, is that South African accent? Yeah, that's exactly right. No, well, she's cheating, right? So she comes from a country where they have to. I moved to the island. I live on an island. I called my wife. We've been there about 3 days. And I said, call our next door neighbor. He's an old timer because we've got a bear in the backyard. It was a raccoon. So I take that with that. Okay, but that's exactly right. So what happens is that, unfortunately, now what can happen for a child that's, say, going to school, this is a real concern for us. Because if a child comes to school in a heightened stress state, whatever the cause of the stress is, whatever that stress is coming from, it could be psychosocial, it could be familial, it could be biological, there is an awful lot of low-frequency sounds in every single school in Ontario. HVACs. We have fluorescent lighting. Ballast gives off low-frequency sounds. So one of the things that we've done in, like we work in communities where there's an awful lot of trauma, like a huge amount of trauma. So pretty much every single kid is either traumatized or raised by someone who is traumatized. We give them earphones, earplugs, sound canceling headphones, and the change in their behavior is extraordinary. Because what's happened is you've removed what you said. You've removed that further source that's triggering fight or flight, just by blocking out what for that child is a bit like, we compare it to having a car alarm where the alarm goes off when a leaf lands on the bonnet of the car. That's what stress does to a child who's in a state of heightened stress reactivity. So all the stuff that you're reading about these days, the stuff that the epigenesis, whatever, thank you, at U of T are doing, I don't know if there's any here, this is why it's so important. It's telling us about the mechanics of this kindled alarm system. That's what Fraser did too when he did HPA. Okay, so here's what I wanted to do tonight. So it's only taken me 40 minutes to get there. What I wanted to do tonight was there's another part that shuts down that's very, very interesting. What shuts down is our ability to mind read. What shuts down is our ability to read body language, to read affect cues. This is incredibly important for the work we do with parents that have been traumatized or raised by traumatized parents. Because historically what's happened is people have come in and tried to educate them, tried to teach them how to be a good parent. Well, that wasn't actually the problem. There was a classic study done in this in 1990 by 0 to 3, in which they took these traumatized moms, and instead of trying to educate them, what they did was they worked on their self-regulation. And the guy who did this is the guy who trained me. And what they found was as their stress diminished and their ability to control their own stress enhanced, their mind reading naturally kicked in. It's a very, very important discovery. So that's what self-regulation is. Self-regulation is all about the mechanism that we use, that the hypothalamus uses, to monitor for danger. It is the system that we use to deal with stress and then recover.